to the community webinar with community legend Jonathan Crow. Absolute pleasure, man. I mean, I got to kick off and again, just say thank you. You've actually been a huge champion to a lot of my learnings, and the fact you're willing to give time and really disclose all the takeaways I've had with the entire community of LinkedIn. I mean, thank you for taking the time out of your day to do this.
Hey, Zach, my pleasure. Legend may be a little much. I don't know about that, but no, I'm happy that you got to get the invite from you. Happy to share everything. I owe so much to the MSP community. It's been a blast building what we have at Ninja and being able to be a part of things. And a big part of it, honestly, for me was people being open to sharing, taking me in, showing me the ropes. So I am always more than happy to share anything I've learned and share connections and all that stuff.
Yeah, and honestly, that's one of the most unique things. So, would love to get into each other's background. For me to kick
Yeah.
off, I actually didn't come from the MSP space, let alone security engineering or admin or MSP. So, I was doing more enterprise sales and project based selling. And, there wasn't really this huge outreach effort. People didn't really take calls from people they didn't know or a contractor or someone they didn't already work with. So, coming to the MSP space as a founder and in an industry that I was new to, still learning, and a market that I absolutely didn't even know about until I was doing market research with a dentist. And he said, "Yeah, I use an MSP." And I was like, "The hell is an MSP?" Obviously, I've come a long way since then. But the biggest thing for me in this transition from enterprise project sales was really learning that it's relationships over everything, investing into that community, and learning how to, I guess, give back. And for someone who didn't come from that style of selling or involvement, not that that was ever frowned upon, but it wasn't really embraced in my previous roles. I really had to learn from scratch. And you were one of the people I got to meet in this transition phase of Sension when we were just starting to go to market, and someone I was able to rely on and get that type of input. So, again, kudos to you. But tell us about yourself. Are you always community, or where did you start?
Oh yeah, definitely not. It's interesting hearing you say that. I mean, I think a lot of what people talking about community and community engagement, community management has really changed in the last couple of years. And I actually come from a content marketing background. Even before like marketing at all, I was an editor at a book publisher. Like I am an English major.
I'm
I
sorry,
am not a
editor at
technical
a book
person.
publisher.
That's right. Yeah. And then I somehow ended up at a VC firm doing content marketing. And that completely changed everything for me. My whole trajectory introduced me to tech,
Yep.
startups. But it feels very similar to how people were talking about content marketing in the early days. And companies kind of, I think the same thing happening, like where there's a lot that's intuitive. And you said
Right.
that, okay, yeah, a lot of it like wasn't maybe like people weren't operationalizing this
It
or they
wasn't
weren't
embraced. It wasn't like encouraged necessarily. It's just something good salespeople did, really, not necessarily. Yeah, exactly.
Exactly. Yeah, I think it's very intuitive for the people who have done well. Business, when it comes down to it, it's relationships, right? Like when you really break it down, it's all the stuff that we think like, well, yeah, duh, like that's it. But it's interesting to see it evolve and become more of a, hey, if we do this stuff more intentionally and bake this actually have people devoted to it, have this baked into an org in a more structured way, we can really get some interesting results. And so it's been cool to be a part of that. I feel like I was around that with content marketing, and that's when I joined Ninja. I was actually at a the VC firm. I was at a endpoint security startup doing
There you
content
go.
for them, and then I came to Ninja to really own content. And my approach to content was like, man, no one wakes up saying like, I can't wait to download an ebook today. Like no one's doing that. They want stuff that's valuable. And there's already becoming so much of a glut of things out there. There's so much noise that's only magnified to like the nth degree,
Oh
right?
my God. Yes.
And so my approach to it is like, if we're gonna create stuff, we have to earn people's time. if we're going to do that, we have to actually deliver value. We actually have to be relevant. We have to know what they really want and need. Um, and I can sit around and guess what that is, or I can go straight in the trenches and talk to people. And I mean, I think that again, like going back to that point, as business leaders, like it's intuitive for some folks, right? Like some folks are just know, like you have to go in and make meaningful relationships, and you have to actually care, and you actually enough to like deliver real value, right? Like we always talk about delivering value in a way, and I think a lot of times it's surface level, but if you're really intentional about it, it requires you to go out and actually talk to people and form relationships. And so that's what I did with content.
That's awesome. And a big focus, just to kind of preview who this webinar is for and whatnot, right? We this webinar is really going to be the most valuable to MSPs who really are looking to better engage with vendors, learning how to best communicate and make that type of difference, but also very much for vendors, especially the earlier stage ones. Or, I mean, Ninja was not early stage when you really started this community. So it's the mature companies looking to invest into a new aspect maybe they haven't before. So realistically, I hope the viewers today do take some value out of this, and we will dive on into it. So let's kick off with this first slide here. And we did hint on it, but why community, and really focusing on that as a business, because we do have the good sales reps, the good account managers, the good customer techs really know that the relationship is key. But as we just said, the business doesn't always focus on it. So I just want to kick off this slide and also just announce again some news. The big thing here is investing into the community. A little tie on to some recent news with Sention. We did just take on an investment from Gula Tech Adventures, the former founder of Tenable, Ron Gula. And a big part of what we allocated the money for was to actually invest into this community as a newer vendor to the space, a new player looking to make a better brand recognition and better add value and share a lot of our learnings. Because those of you who don't know, changing settings on workstations, servers, browsers, and applications, not the most exciting thing in the world, but also not very well understood all the time. So our goal with part of this investment is to build that community, build the education around settings and why it really matters. So we did kick off a little bit in the initial talk, why community matters so much. But tell us a little bit about like the focus chapter. Obviously, Ninja didn't hire you for community. It kind of is a role you almost created, if that's fair to say. So
Yeah.
what's the difference from a business just, community matters versus actually focusing on it? Is there a difference?
Yeah, I think so. I think that, well, first of all, let me back up and just say congratulations on the funding, and also secure for configurations and endpoint hardening.
Don't
Not
call
so
it sexy.
interesting. We
Everyone's gonna know
disagree.
you're
You and
lying.
I, we nerded out. Like we met at MSP GeekCon last year, and you gave me like the pitch, and I was like, let me stop you right there. And you had
I,
me at
Full
endpoint hardening.
transparency, I gave like the highest level explanation of hardening and what Sention does to Jonathan, because I'm very accustomed to meeting people who just don't really understand the challenges and the innovation that we're bringing to market. And I give this high level to Jonathan, and immediately he's like, "Oh, because of disruption? Yeah, learning mode." And I was just like, "The hell? Who is this guy who knows my space better than even me at this point?" So, very much was incredible to see your joy talking about hardening, because that's rare as all get out.
Well, I'll just say, I mean, yeah, hats off to you guys. So cool to see you growing. I really do think that from a defender's perspective, those secure configurations, endpoint hardening, it's some of the most bang for your buck you can do.
Yep.
And so I'm just glad that you guys are getting the word out there. And super cool to see you getting the funding and growing. Kudos to you.
Awesome. Appreciate it.
Um,
So give us the advice.
so
What did Ninja do to
yeah.
really embrace you creating this role? What advice? I mean, treat today's session, live mentorship on
Yeah.
LinkedIn. How do you think, if Ninja were to restart with a community first approach, where would they be making that initial investment in you? How would they better focus out of the gate?
Yeah, man, this is a great question. So, I think in terms of advice that people can use and actually run with, It's going to vary obviously on your circumstance and the stage that you're in. At any startup, people are going to be wearing multiple hats, and there's going to be a lot of people going out and having to build relationships, going on webinars constantly like you've been doing, and just by virtue of doing all that stuff, you're going to be building those relationships and outreach and some community. So I do think that there's especially for startups and for MSPs, where again it's a small team, oftentimes it's the owner doing a lot of the sales and marketing stuff at first. I think you're gonna be doing this kind of stuff just without, like, again, operationalizing it maybe. And so the difference with Ninja, me really owning content, when the pandemic happened, all of a sudden we didn't have trade shows, and so we lost that source of leads. And so I kicked off a webinar series called MSP Live Chats. We did it every couple of weeks. We committed to that cadence, and by doing that, I was like, man, I gotta get good speakers. I want to find actual practitioners. And by doing that, I really started building out the community. But again, it kind of goes back to that source of I think the way that people buy, I mean, this is probably cliche at this point to say, but the way people buy and go down the consideration phase is different now, right? Like you and I, like when we're considering buying something, do we like, yeah, we'll go to review sites and look at third parties and stuff, but a lot of the times we're gonna like find people who use YouTube channels that like that
100%.
person, I respect their opinion on things. I want to know what they have to say about this. I also want to know what my peers are going to say. I don't want marketing fluff, right? Like I want to hear from peers. And so I'm going to go to Reddit and get like the unvarnished truth, right?
Oh, and that is definitely raw truth in the Reddit world.
Right? But but it's the best too. It's like, what an amazing opportunity. You are getting access to it's, I mean, do you know how painful it is for people to like, if you're listening and you're at an org that has a mature enough sales operation or market operation where you're doing like closed loss interviews and stuff, trying to get insights about like, but what do you really feel about this? What's the truth? It's so hard to do. And so having people put that on the internet publicly, amazing. Like every company should be taking advantage of that. Like, give me the truth. I want to hear the hard stuff, because then I want to be able to do something about it.
That's
So
a huge thing. I mean, it sounds like
Yeah.
Ninja really operationalized this aspect for you and that raw truth. I mean, we're going to talk a little bit about how to empower those champions and get those already loud voices, sometimes even a little bit louder, and how to embrace them further. So I'm excited for that part of the call too. But I got one follow-up question here. Obviously, Ninja was large enough at the point they brought you on where they could have a sales team and they could allocate a dedicated person to community. So Senseion is a little bit of the opposite, where we're focusing on community realistically out of the gate. I mean, this is our first major round, and I am responsible for a lot of these go-to-market, first-round sales. My colleague Henry helps with the onboarding, customer success alongside with me. But one of our first hires will be a community manager whose priority 1A is simply following Reddit, engaging communities like MSP Geek, Tech Degenerates, right? That's going to be our very first hire really on the operations side of it. So a little bit different there, where we do want to create these processes and proceduralize this out of the gate as opposed to doing it later.
Yeah.
But yeah, so that's just one point I really wanted to call out here in the difference of what we're looking at.
Yeah, and there's again, I think the advice for businesses that have a product, there's something else here too, where the community is still, this is such a young,
Yes.
I mean, there's conferences dedicated to community now. There's definitely like community management is something that's become established in the last few years, but it's still pretty young. And the way that it can look can be very different. For companies that are selling a product, there's community, in addition to the marketing side of things, or the social engagement, where you're almost running like PR in a sense. Like,
I actually asked you the question, does community mean posting and commenting from the business page? And you kind of said it was a little bit different than that.
Yeah, well, I mean, the way that we've approached it, we do basically my charter is to make sure that we are active where our audience is, and that we have a good presence there, that we're actually contributing in a good way, that we're building affinity and awareness there, right? And at the same time, we're also building our internal community. And there's a little bit of a different thing there. So there's the overall, like, we want to shape awareness and how the broader all of our prospects, all of the audience of our world, the influencers and everything, how they see us. We want to influence that, right? And try to make that a good thing, because we feel like that's an impactful way to influence sales. In addition to just giving back to the community. And then, but then
There's a lot
also
of
in our
strategies that
own
go into it. It is that giving back. You don't just hire an
yes.
influencer and contract someone out. It is actually getting them to be part of your team as opposed to just tossing. Maybe there are gifts involved. Reward people. We'll talk about that here in a minute. But
Yeah.
it's not just simply, hey, I'm going to give you this much money, go say kind things. Like you just said, it is a little bit of giving back and creating education around topics.
Man, you bring up a great point. So there's a whole nother side of this with like influencer marketing and everything too. But yeah, I mean, I think you do have to be people are going to see through things if you don't, or if you're not engaging in a genuine way, you're not going to have an impact. But the other part, so we have also we have our own Discord server, right? And that's grown a
Awesome.
ton. And in that case, it's less about a broader like public perception play and more about really making sure that our product team and sales marketing, the whole company really, we have direct through lines to our customers, that we're not just doing BS, right? Like, and so there's, I would be, I need to call out our product managers here, because the way Ninjas approach this, it's not just me. Like, we have one of my first hires. My first hire as a community person was a very vocal customer who
so cool.
joined the team and ended up now is on the product management team. So he's actually steering direction of the product development. And so there's an aspect of that too, where Ashley Cooper at Gradient talks about this too. There's we've heard about like product-led growth. There's actually a community-led growth movement too that's kind of in its nascent stages, where
That's cool.
if you're mindful about this, and a good thing about this role, especially for like you guys starting at really super early days, it's a great way to ensure that you are maintaining that very tight, direct connection between your product team and your customers, and that feedback loop is really solid.
And coming at it from two different perspectives, if an MSP is listening or another early stage vendor, I mean, we're going to find out. Sention's the ultimate case study of making one of our first hires being a community. But do you think it would be easier, or I guess if you were to be, an owner of a small business, we can say a small MSP or a small vendor, it doesn't really make a difference for this scenario. Would you, if you are an owner who can do sales, would you prefer to have a counterpart salesperson or a counterpart focusing on community if you were to be an SMB and could only make one hire? Basically, the root of my question is, do you need to have a mature operations and mature sales team to have someone dedicated to community? Or is this something like we're attempting that is perfectly fine to do early?
Yeah, I'm gonna be annoying and say
out.
like there's not one answer, right? That's right for everybody. I think, especially like on the MSP side, I think in the MSP side, I think it is a little different. And I would love, like, we should totally have this.
That would be really
make
cool
sure
to get an MSP who wants to really allocate like vendors do back to the community.
Yeah, well, I mean, like on the MSP side, like it's definitely different because like you don't have that product necessarily. You have services that you're selling. That feedback loop isn't so much of a thing. It's more about the perception and trying to gain awareness and differentiation, right? And I think it can be hugely impactful. And I don't see a lot of MSPs doing this. Like MSPs are great about being active in our own MSP community, but getting active in their target their ideal client profile, like that community, you know, if like you serve
Actually, an
lawyers, or if you
interesting
serve
aspect.
dentists or whatever, right? Being involved in those communities, or even your local one, and like the shared centers of influence, like there's so much cool stuff you could do there. And I think again, like I think it overflows into sales.
Yep.
I guess what I would say is like, um, I mean, sales, you really do. You need someone at some
Hmm.
point who's going to have that be their solid role. I think there's no question there. So I don't know. I hesitate to about the either or kind of thing that you put me on here,
Yep.
but uh, but I will say in a lot of MSPs cases, they are the best salesperson. What they're looking for is more of like the lead gen aspect of it. They're looking for like, how do I get the initial things? They are going to be the closers, right?
Yep.
And in that case, having, I would push back against the dichotomy and say having someone who is going to be focused on this community approach. Um, yeah, I don't know. Like if you, it's tough because like if you
It's
incentivize
extremely
them,
tough, and it depends on the existing team and the
yeah.
existing processes in place. So I mean, it was a hard question, and you haven't necessarily experienced both sides, where we are quite literally experiencing in real time from opposite sides.
Yeah, I mean, I guess like because I think it's there's value in having separation too. You know what makes me think of is the people talking about VCIOs and like
Yeah.
how they're incentivized and everything. And if a VCIO is the one doing the QBR and they're really tied to, you know, cross sell, upsell stuff, are they really going to be the best strategic advisor too? Or are they going to be? They're going to eventually the client's going to be like, okay, what else do you want from me? Like that, like you're here to get money from me again, and that's not
Yep.
really necessarily what you want to do. And so the same with the community side. Like I'm not beholden to specific lead gen goals, and I think that's
That's
really
cool.
enabled me to operate differently in a way that I think is more effective. So I think you need probably both of those roles, but I think on the sales side, having a community mindset is going to be that's just the direction everything's going. I think you need to have at least that mindset.
It is that transition, and one of the things you did say as well is how to communicate and where to communicate. So, I mean, we've read all the classic sales books. It used to be a difference maker to write a letter. It was a difference maker to make a phone call. Now those are just an email used to be a difference maker. Now all of that is just either legacy, not done at all and doesn't have an impact, or it's overwhelming and not really a thing. So it is this transition of where to communicate with our ICP, our ideal customer profile, and for us vendors working in the MSP market, it is those communities that actually really like your point and find it interesting. An MSP creating a customer community for them, that would be interesting. So we did bring up Reddit a little bit ago. Raw truth. People will definitely say good things and very loud bad things about vendors if they feel so inclined. So,
Oh
you
yes.
know, a big thing as a company does get really fast growth, or a existing company does something in the spotlight that is frowned upon. Is there any best practices you could share that? I mean, we talked about the interview being authentic over being aggressive back and saying you're wrong, we do it better, right? Like you said you embrace this type of thing, but I
Yeah.
mean, don't you get a little defensive? I mean, this is your baby, this is your company. Like, how do you balance that and sometimes take away something positive?
Oh man, so hard to do, right? I can only imagine too for being a founder, you know, being a co-founder, like so
A
hard
lot
to
of emotional
do.
ties to what you do.
I will say too, there are times when you know there's only one side of the story being presented, and it's very hard not to want to come back with the other side of the story, right? Publicly, but it's not the way that we approach things because you just don't want to get in the argument publicly, right?
Yeah,
Online, especially with someone who is anonymous, really.
it
You know,
really
you don't want
is.
to be you the like you know the co-founder or an owner or whatever getting an argument with like um
For everybody to follow.
yeah, yeah, with Starboy, 420 or whatever. Like, you don't want to. Yeah, I mean, the way that we've, I think you and I've told you this before when we've talked, but I mean, this is kind of also a key part of the origin of community at Ninja. Like, whenever we set up a Reddit monitoring Slack channel. So anytime there was a post on Reddit that was mentioning Ninja, this is still operating today. Or flagged on a couple of keywords, it will post in the Slack channel. And whenever I saw like there was any post there, um, like my heart sank. I was like, oh man, like what is
A
it
little
now?
nervous.
Yes,
What is it this
100%.
time? Maybe it's a positive one. You don't know until you click it.
Yeah, exactly. Now fast forward to today, like whenever I see that, I'm like, oh, awesome. Like I can't wait to see and the big difference is
Cool transition.
it's not with our investment in community. I think this is a big takeaway for folks. A big change is we've invested through our investment in community. Whenever we go to those posts now, we have folks who are quick to rally on our behalf, and they are sharing their positive experiences. They're sharing their takes, and it makes the world of difference. Like that means more than anything that we can say in return. Now, I will say for advice, before you can get to that point, our tactic was always like, I mean, you can kind of tell, you use your judgment. Like, is this a real complaint or is this someone just trolling? If it's trolling, like, don't engage. But otherwise, like, people, I felt like you've probably seen this, Zach, in other phases of, other roles you've had and before. But like a lot of times when people are complaining about something, especially when they're taking it public, it's because they don't feel heard. They're feeling frustrated. They're dealing with this whatever issue. It's super frustrating and they're not getting heard. And so basically this is like support 101, right? Like we come back with a very simple, like, hey, like really sorry that you're dealing with this. We always respond from a human's, like I will respond directly. One of the PMs will respond. So it's a human, right? We try to be human with it. Like, I'm sorry you're dealing with that. Like, I would be frustrated with that too. Let's we this? Can we take it to DM?
Kind of a
I want to help
solution-driven
you take care of this.
response as opposed to a defensive. And, you know, I mean, going to the other point here, it sounds like having those real relationships is what actually builds that champion momentum. Like you said, like getting to have partners back you on a public forum, like that is absolutely awesome. And, talking about Sention's perspective, prioritizing this early, we've spent less than 1% on marketing activities. The trade shows we've gone to, it's either been a volunteer or a free booth, right? We're just getting started in this respect. And, because of the investment, I've given as much time as I can focus. It's, a lot of hats. But if something is said, I know there's people I can rely on. I mean, just when the NTLM 0 Day came out and posting an MSP Geek, our mutual friend, I believe, Jason Hahn, popped in and was like, yep, this was really helpful. And I was like, that was really nice of you to publicly say you know who I am. So that type of stuff really matters, especially when you're first investing into community at the start.
100%. I mean, think about for the MSPs watching, what's your best source of new business? It's gotta be referrals, right? Most likely. That's the best. Like having someone else speak highly about you on your behalf, it's gold. And so that's really, it's that same mindset, and it's just being a little bit more intentional about how can you bake that into the operations. Maybe you're not at the stage where you can devote an entire single role to that. But how can you bake it into the roles that you do have in your processes, your operations?
And speaking of that, being intentional. Yeah. I mean, let's actually pop up this next slide because you are the definition of being intentional about this, right? I think you literally said this during our pre-interview. Start with the people, right? Start just getting to know the individuals as opposed to just talking about your product. And that's something really hard for a lot of vendors who, as a founder, right? My baby is Sention. I will talk about Sention for hours on any forum in any context. But you said it was very important to start with the people side and not push product in these communities. And as we talk about the champions we have who back us in these and actually recognizing them, right? So, recognizing champions can't be an easy thing. Yes, you'll see the one-hand comments, maybe they'll back you, but like actually recognizing and embracing them can't be easy to identify. I mean, tell us a little bit more. What do you mean start with people and not the platform?
Yeah. So, I I love this conversation because it's getting me to think about this stuff a little bit more
Putting you on
deeply
the
too.
spot live on air.
Yeah, no, but this is great. Like, so I think another maybe another component of why I think I've been successful with this is coming from that content background. Like early days, I wasn't like reaching out to people and saying like, "Hey, like, um, my goal is to like let's have a conversation about Ninja," right? And like trying to make that happen. It was more that I was seeking out shared interests and causes. What are the real needs for the audience? That how can we actually help the community? Right. When I was starting off with all this, it was right after. Right around the time of some pretty high profile breaches that were impacting folks. Um, and so security was becoming a huge topic. And the way that I approached it was like, let's have real, impactful, meaningful conversations about this. Like, let's
Just about the topic.
really
No,
help
no
people
real
out.
end goal. No like objective at the end. Would you say?
Yeah, no, absolutely. It was truly. I mean, that's what it comes back to. Like it, like this has to be more of a it's not just like a sneaky like tactic or something like you truly are like have to be wanting to be genuine and like really care and want to make an impact, right? And so you know we were able to do kind of both things. So like no insecurity was an important thing. I
Mhm.
looked around. I was like, well, who are people in the space who are really speaking truth and really seem to be aligned with
Tell
like
me the loudest people aren't always right. Is that possible?
you can tell the people who actually care and really are just like they're giving value, right? So like I mean, I'll just name one, right? Like Huntress was very clearly when I was newer to the space too, right? Like I was coming from endpoint security, but um so I was a little familiar with them, but then joining Ninjas, the MSP world is like okay, like Huntress is clearly like they're a darling for good reason, right? The community loves
Yep.
them because they are constantly giving back in very real, meaningful ways. And so I was like, well, let's reach out to them and like how can we have a cool, meaningful conversation and get them involved. And then also there's a bit of a halo effect there where, we're in the same room with those guys and like we're showing that we care too. So
Mhm.
when it talking people, not platforms, that's kind of what I meant with it. Also just like going in those early days, I remember diving into MSPs are us and a
Yep.
different Slack and Discord channels and MSP Geek obviously too and noticing okay who are the people who are very active and vocal but also like in a very thoughtful way. I mean you can kind of get an intuitive sense of the leaders in a space, um, and then just finding out like what are ways like these guys obviously care a lot.
Yep.
How can we help give them a bigger platform and also just like they're smart people, they care, they want to make a difference. How can we help with that?
Yep. Absolutely. And it's really cool seeing the Huntress approach, right? Because you still see Kyle post and do his one thing I really like that they do is very transparent and founder roadmap talks. They do this I think like twice a year or something. And that level of transparency I think is really cool and helps make the partners you have and the prospects that are coming feel more engaged. Obviously, Huntress is far away from early stage, but they still listen, and that's something that I know we've talked over at Sention. How can we create that better line of transparency? And I agree, they've done a really great job. So let's dive a little bit into this. So we talked about making this people focused, not so much
Yeah.
pushing platform. We do have the flip side of this. We've named some really good communities that we have. But I mean, let's talk about learnings from bad experiences, right? So this next slide, I know we kick off with, closed off communities is something you said, right? So there's really groups or circles maybe or online forums where you've tried to embrace this type of approach and embrace this agnostic education, but maybe it didn't really result in what you were looking for, which it sounds like, and I know this just from our previous conversation offline, like you are very much I am driven by having those friends and people talk highly about what I'm doing. There's not a huge sales drive to your mindset, although obviously you've talked about the value of community and sales. It's very cool to talk to you offline and actually hear that's not the driving factor for you. It's extremely unique. So kudos there. But anyway, you did share, what works and what doesn't. So obviously you've experimented with things and had lesser positive experiences. Anything you can share about any of these points?
Yeah, the closed off communities thing. I mean, when you're seeking, I guess here's what I would say. Like another way to think about maybe, especially when you're trying to decide how do I devote time to this, because I'm sure there's some people who are listening who are like, yeah, this is great. Like, you know, I have all the time all day to like hang out in all these places, right? You as a MSP owner or a small business person, like you don't have that time. Well, you just got to be mindful about where you're going. There's so much out there.
Yeah.
And I mean, fragmentation, right? It's real. Like seeing Twitter, X now, turn into what it is. And like, I think social media, and we're at a really interesting phase now where there's fragmentation and there's all these different smaller, more niche silos popping up. And so you
Yeah.
got to be mindful about where you're spending your time, right? And I think choosing that wisely, trying to focus on places that are going to get you, allow you to be able to like have the most impact and engage with the most people is definitely one way to approach it.
Yeah. And I think one good thing to call out is LinkedIn can also be a community. A lot of us do use that as the business platform. I've
Oh yeah,
created a
for
lot
sure.
of relationships just from LinkedIn, which, it's not a forum site. It's more of a, timeline post on your wall type of thing, but it is still an area, at least for me, without LinkedIn, literally would not have known what to build at Sention. All of the networks that I
Totally.
had never met told me to build this thing, and that's the only reason we were able to, mature, get this raise done, and actually start to have conversations like this.
That's amazing.
Yeah,
Yeah, I
it's
mean
it's super cool.
so here's one thing I put it, like, one thing I'm always wary of, and I'm always trying to stay conscious of, is you start off like it's new, like you're trying to jump in, and it's all the exploratory thing, like um trying not to let off the gas there or trying not to get complacent, trying to be mindful of being in bubbles, and just always trying to be on the lookout for, are there other things popping up that have, am I assuming too much? Am I closing myself off a little bit? So that's something that we're constantly trying to kind of wrestle with.
Mhm.
Um, but yeah.
Yeah, no, that makes sense. And the last point here, make the use case relatable. Something I've personally got in trouble for. Right, this is a learning experience. Like I said, I didn't come from necessarily a community-driven background in previous roles. So when I was pre-product, especially pre-product, I would want to chime in as much as possible and inject my
Yeah.
use case into conversations because I wanted people to not buy anything at that point, but I wanted to be told I was wrong or be told, oh, that's cool, tell me more, right? And, obviously people first from what we've learned in this webinar and all of our offline talks, but at what point is it acceptable to start injecting a little bit? Is there like an inflection moment? Does it have to be like asked for? Anything you can share on that? Because this is something I'm still learning.
Yeah, yeah, totally. So, I've got a couple of thoughts with this. So, yeah, I mean, I think the way not to do it is, if you
Easier to talk
go
about.
to, I mean, well, like if you go to like Reddit or Spiceworks or some of these other places, and like you'll see like someone will ask a question, and then usually there'll be one person being like, and cue the vendors, and then like it'll be like five vendors in a row who are like, well, OP, like you should check out this solution, blah 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 blah, and like,
Yep.
and even if you're cool about it, like doing that just feel, and then like this person asked the question to the community, and now this post is essentially dead. That sucks, right? And so like,
Yeah.
you don't necessarily want to do that. I mean, I found that like if you're answering questions and pointing people in directions and actually useful answers and solutions that aren't related to you, and then like there is a question that actually your solution is like do it. Like don't hold off on that. Like it's not a bad thing. Like if you don't do it, a competitor might, and like
Yep.
you should totally say like, hey, like here's a way to we think about this. You know, you can still like be tactful with how you're doing it, that you're not too salesy with it, but like I think you should be proud of the solution that you're offering, and totally present it when it's relative. Don't hold back too much. But yeah, also like try to just have that EQ, and like this is a hard thing to kind of train, right? But
Really
like
hard.
having that that awareness of like, dude, read the room, like don't kill the thread here. Like they're wanting to hear from the community. And so to that, like one last thing with this question, then like it kind of goes back to there's a real scalability thing, and this is what's so cool about seeing you guys adopt this approach early on. I'm excited for you for is that
Thanks, brother.
I think there's a real like it helps with scalability, because if you're doing this, like you don't have to be like the old way was for a company to hire an intern and just be like, okay, monitor for every single post that's out there and recommend our solution. A much more authentic, effective way about this is to make form the relationships with people who can be your champions and your advocates in these spaces, but they are the native users of it. So they are the people who are actually on Reddit all the time, so you don't have to be. They will recommend your services in a way that's not salesy and that's way more authentic and effective. Same thing with these like closed spaces, like certain LinkedIn groups, all those things. Like it's not about you yourself being active in these places. It's about finding the people who already are, and finding ways that you can help them, and that you can, they can be a good advocate for you.
One thing we did brush over, which I meant to ask about, but this is a good time to bring it up. After recognizing those champions and embracing them, is and this is me asking as someone going into this and identifying my champions right now, is there a way to incentivize them away or reward them outside of just talking to them? Like, do they get to see behind the scenes at Ninja? Are they getting maybe
Yeah.
some extra swag? Like, how do you really incentivize those existing champions to stay champions and be louder even?
We give them all Ferraris. No, like we don't. We don't
That
like.
next round of funding, and we all get a car.
Oh man, there's probably some listeners who are like, yeah, I'm still waiting for my swag, dude. No, I mean
No,
like
the
so.
response to that is it's on the roadmap. That's just what you say.
No, I mean so yeah. I mean, I would say like there's so many ways you can go about this. The way that we do it, we definitely like reward people with swag and like and just calling them out, and like and giving just thanking them a lot. But in addition to that, we do have a stars program that's our most active community champions,
Ninja
and
stars.
we've
Awesome name.
Ninja stars, yep. And we've put things together where we offer them to pay to travel to a conference a year. We offer them some funds for training, like because we want them to be able to do some cool personal career development. We want to help enable that. And then also we have some additional swag and everything, and also additional access, like you mentioned, like
Cool.
giving them like the people who are most vocal, even like in a negative way. It's that can hurt, but like they're saying this because they care, right? They're not
They
gone
do.
yet. Like they're saying this because they give a damn. And if you embrace them, the flip side of this is like you actually have to deliver. Like you have to show that like you are not just listening, you're able to act on feedback. But if you can do that, you'll win them over, and it's so valuable. And so like bringing people in, giving them more direct access, like here are the product managers, like here's Sal the CEO, like have meaningful conversations with them. People are very appreciative of that, and I think that, and like also at the same time, like sending someone like a surprise, like hey, I saw like you were talking about how you were taking your first vacation in like 3 years.
Yep.
Like here's like something small. Like here's like $100 gift card for you to do something fun during your vacation. Like there's all sorts of ways you can get creative and do something just to show that like, hey, like we see you and we appreciate you.
That's
Goes a long way.
awesome. And at the start of that, you did say, calling them out and giving them vocal praise. When you said that, is that like in just a direct message to them, or is that literally on the forums or giving them their own post on social media? What's a positive way to call out a champion?
Yeah, I mean, there's things that we can do where we call them out like in our own Discord, like certainly on social there's a way that like we have like customer appreciation, that sort of thing. Um and I don't know, I mean, I've just found that like this is one of those things that there's the advice of like do, especially early on, do things that don't scale. Like having the one-on-one doesn't have to be a huge thing, but just like reaching out to someone directly and just be like, hey, like I really appreciate that. Like
Makes enough of a
it
difference.
makes a big difference. And then like you've got that personal touch, right? Like it's such a especially like in our space, that's the other thing. Like as an MSP, as a small business owner, looking around at your space and seeing like who your competitors are and their approach to things, like be different, you know?
That's awesome. Yeah, this is great stuff, especially as us developing this type of program. So, we talked about this a lot. Champion is key, and this is not directly driving sales, but it is driving product development. I mean, your example was getting a product manager involved with the conversation with those champions. So that is absolutely amazing to hear that Ninja wants to do that, and it's a worthy allocation of a PM's time, because I don't think a lot of enterprises at that scale would really expose such a sensitive or time constrained resource to the community. So that's really cool to hear. Yeah, I
Yeah,
mean,
you
you
should
got
ask our
something to add on
PMs
that
about
one?
it. You should ask our PMs about it. Some may, but no, I mean, like, I think the other thing is like our PMs have found it really refreshing too. Like, um, they don't want to just be building in a corner by themselves. Like we make sure that like we share. We have another Slack channel internally at Ninja that's called Customer Love, and like a lot of it's
That's
like
cool.
we just like when we see comments, like we want to make sure that the product team gets those kudos. Like, look, that feature that like you worked on, like here's people loving that right now. Like they want to see that stuff and they want to hear the feedback so they can make better things. They like the human connection too. You do have to put some guardrails around it, or at least establish some expectations, I guess.
Yeah.
And I will say that like Ninja's a little different because we've hired folks from the MSP world who were really active in the community. It's just baked into who they are. And
Yep.
so I'm super fortunate in that I don't have to like go around like beating that drum too much. Like they're already
Begging
bought
them.
in.
That's
Yeah.
really awesome to hear that they want to do that, and I think it is a differentiating factor. If there are any newer to the industry people or recent college grads coming out, or looking for jobs, like that is something that matters, is wanting to engage just naturally, or even job seekers. Getting your name out there does absolutely make a difference to enterprises that are hiring.
100%. That's a great point. Like being active in these places, and I mean, I think there's a whole nother subtopic around this about like building your own personal brand for
Oh
sure.
yeah, personal brand was the hot word, I think, at the start and last year big time, but maybe we need to bring it back a little bit. I don't want to spend too much time on this slide because we did hammer in a lot of these points, but like we said, like I hinted at earlier, you don't have a sales quota, Jonathan. That is pretty wild, given you are kind of sales adjacent, right? You are part of that demand gen top of funnel driver. So how does Ninja justify your role, or what insight can you be about how you hold yourself to a certain metric?
Yeah, it's a great question. I mean, and again, this probably depending on the size of your org and the maturity level and how you're approaching things, depending on all sorts of stuff. This may not apply to you directly, but like Ninja has, when Ninja started off, like I was like the maybe fourth marketing hire or something like that. And
Cool.
I was running the content engine that was designed to generate leads. And so there was very much more in the early stages, like let's give the salespeople leads, right? But as we've grown, it's shifted. Now we have basically marketing is divided into two sections. There's the demand generation side, and then there's the basically like brand awareness side. And this is where you have things like PR, some broader comms, and the stuff and the crazy stuff I'm doing, right? And it's really based more around acknowledging that as in marketing, like your goal is to get on the radar first. Like you're not
Sure.
trying to do everything at once. You're not trying
Brand
to
exposure.
like lock eyes with like that person across the room and ask them to marry you, right? Like in the same go, right? Like you want to get on their radar. You want to get that relationship built, and then you want to progress it from there. So there's handoffs and stuff. So that's kind of how Ninja approaches it. And I recognize that like for a lot of small businesses, that's not going to necessarily apply, but it's probably one of those things where there's the conversation of like, just because you're a small org, you don't have people filling these functions, it doesn't mean that you're not still doing it. It just means like you're having to wear those hats. So like if you can take on and off those hats, that's the name of the game, I guess.
Yeah, and I think my expectation, again, early stage of this, the way I'm anticipating measuring our success or our effort in this community is really just hearing, oh, I heard about you from so and so, or oh, I saw you mention this, right? So hearing that someone's heard of us before I meet them personally is, it's a hard metric. It's not a hard metric you can just have into some algorithm and CRM driven, right? This is something more personable, harder to measure, but that's how I am anticipating kind of holding our next hire who's focusing on community to that level of success. Is how many times do I go to a trade show and they say, oh, I saw you made this hire and they're talking about this, or seeing the actual conversational come up as opposed to just, oh, I heard your product does this. I want to hear, oh, I heard you talk about this instead.
Yeah, I mean, I think it's very easy to see more of the brand awareness side of marketing as fluffy. Like people are like, oh well, like at the end of the day, you drive leads, you get revenue, like that's what really matters. And hey, good point. But like if no one's heard of you and no one has a perception of you, like that's gonna be so much harder to do. It's a necessary thing. It's super important. It's harder to quantify. It's harder to measure, but it doesn't mean that it's not important.
100%.
And honestly too, like this, what we're talking about here, like the early stages, I think one of the reasons we're having this conversation and that we're seeing more and more people having community-based roles is because the traditional ways of doing that, thanks to fragmentation, thanks to like these digital communities, it's just different. Like it's not the same. You don't have Don Draper, making the ads and like that's all it takes, right?
Dude,
like,
I think he'd still win today. I think he would
he's still so good.
That was an awesome example. All right, we are wrapping up here. Let's hop over to this last slide here, and we keep on talking about this being a new thing, something a lot of people are looking into. So what's the future? I'm just learning this in real time, so I don't really know if I have the strongest opinion here. I have expectations and why we're choosing as a company to prioritize this, but you've been through very beginning to early stage now of community. Is there anything you really see transitioning? Is there anything you're looking forward to on how you're going to be better in 2025 with your community initiative? Any trends you can talk about?
Yeah. I do think like there's probably a lifespan where like we'll see this becoming more and more of like a specialized role, and then there'll be some point where you like it's the key is like, oh, this is jump the shark. Or like this has become too much of like a snake in its tail or something. But I think we have a long way to go. And like I think it's I would not be surprised to see if folks are, I don't know how like plugged in folks are to various like trends in like the software development and like the SaaS selling world, but like product-led growth became such a big thing. And I feel like it really just captured like it gave a name to something that everyone kind of feels. It's like, oh yeah, this is like a common sense type of thing.
The good companies pushed towards to it, but there wasn't really a definition. Yep.
I feel like community-led growth is going to become more and more of a thing, and then it's going to become more operationalized. I mean, I think it's just the way that like, with AI and the way social platforms are devolving and everything, like
everyone without AI talk. So that was pretty good.
I just think like that there's going to be more and more. I mean, you've already seen it with like how Google results like now prioritize Reddit, right? Like people want to hear from real people, and that's going to be harder to do. There's so much noise out there. People want to hear from real people, and they're going to gravitate to the spaces that they feel like are the last bastions of those, you know? And so I think that this is like we're just seeing the start of the wave, right? Like this is going to be becoming more and more of an important thing. In terms of like what I'm excited about for Ninja. So we've got our own kind of community set around like helping people know what's coming up in Ninja, getting them involved in the product development and testing things out, and then
Even more
advocating for us,
transparency
right?
on that side. Hmm.
We also now have a community that we launched called the IT Leadership Lab, and we're trying to make that more about uh, helping people advance in their careers. And so if they were an individual contributor, now all of a sudden they're a manager, they're looking to go into leadership. Like the question that I keep thinking about is like, with all this, like we're in I know this is so cliche. I hate seeing this kind of stuff, but like constant change, like this is a very disruptive period we're in. I feel like helping people who are in IT become stronger leaders within their orgs is something that is super valuable for themselves, but also just for the company. I feel like like IT is such a center for all this, and so having IT leaders and having MSPs who are providing that for the companies who can't do that in house, like it's just going to become more and more important. And so we're trying to help people develop that too. So there's a whole nother community like side of it that we're developing that I'm super excited about.
That is very cool to hear, and I know you guys are starting to release that slowly and start to promote it more. I'm sorry, say the name one more time for the audience.
The IT Leadership Lab.
IT Leadership Lab. So very excited to see where that goes. I know I've talked about potentially, doing some of the education work we provide in there. So very excited to see where that takes off for you. But dude, that was absolutely fabulous. Thank you for sharing that. And let's just pull up this last slide, plug ourselves here. We are community people. What's next for us? I will kick off. So we did close our investment round. So we have been spending money rapidly, right? Kind of. So we have invested into a booth at Right of Boom. We will be at MSP GeekCon, and we are going to be doing some more IT Nation shows with some of that pitch it money as well. But the two we already have booked being Right of Boom and MSP Geek, we are very excited to be heading out to, I guess, Florida and Vegas for both of those. And outside of that, we are going to be bringing on a community manager and really prioritizing this. So excited to live through some of these future trends with you. Any shows or events you want to plug on Ninja's behalf?
Yeah, there's one coming up next week, Zach. It's next Thursday. Yep. You or Henry's going to be on there. And yeah, we're doing our 4th annual IT Festivus. Festivus for the admins of us is what we're calling it. And we're going to be celebrating. We've invited our community, and this goes out to anyone who you don't have to be a part of the Ninja Discord or a Ninja customer. We're doing some contests. We're inviting IT folks to share the admin feat of strength they're most proud of for the year. And we're giving away a Steam Deck for the winner of that. And then we're also inviting people to share their IT grievances. And the audience will vote on the winner for that. And they're going to win a big Lego Lord of the Rings set.
Just injecting that people aspect, the good and the bad stories. I love the initiative that you're driving.
Yeah. People don't really need much encouragement to share their air their grievances, but I think it's really cool when people are sharing their wins too. And then we're also going to be doing some talk about like security and endpoint hardening too in a segment that's going to be a lot of fun. So we're doing IT Festivus next Thursday. It's going to be on YouTube. You don't have to register. You just drop into our YouTube so we can get you a link probably in the comments of this post. Next Thursday, December 19th at 11 a.m. Eastern. And then outside of that, on the other side of the holidays and everything, Zach will see you at Right of Boom and MSP Geek for sure.
That's awesome to hear. Well, thanks for coming on. We're at the top of the hour, and we will be again streaming together next week. Thank you, everyone, for joining, and we'll talk then.
Thanks again, Zach. Appreciate it. Thanks, everybody. Happy holidays.
Perfect. Awesome, dude. What'd you think?
That was fun. Like, that was really good. I hope that was